I want you to take a second and picture a classroom. Just visualize the standard educational environment in your mind.
Yeah, whatever pops into your head first.
Right. You are probably seeing rows of desks, a whiteboard at the front, maybe some colorful alphabet posters on the wall, or, a teacher handing out some sort of foundational worksheet.
It's the universal image.
It really is. It is the universal image of early learning that we all carry around. But the source material we're diving into today, well, it flips that entire image completely on its head. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one.
Our mission today is to explore a document called the Welcome and Introduction Guide. It is for a pilot initiative called the Mothers as First Teachers Program.
Which was created by Randy F. Rubio, the founder of the Stripling Warriors Guild.
Exactly. And we're going to unpack how this program aims to break the cycle of poverty by shifting the starting line of education completely out of the schoolhouse and placing it right inside the home.
And that completely flips how we usually think about preschool, right? Or just early childhood development in general.
It really does.
Because whether you are a parent currently navigating these early years or an educator looking at the cognitive foundation of your students, or honestly just someone fascinated by how human brains are wired, this material offers a heavily research-based perspective on how everyday presence physically shapes the brain.
And it does so without relying on those traditional academic structures we usually associate with learning.
Exactly.
You can actually feel that departure from tradition on the very first page of the guide. Before getting into any pedagogical theory, there's this visual header. It is just a beautifully stylized word that says, welcome.
And it's surrounded by these hand-drawn stars and snowflakes.
Yeah, it sets an immediate tone. Warm, inviting, deliberately unintimidating. I mean, it looks nothing like an academic syllabus or some rigid developmental milestone chart.
Which is necessary considering the root challenge this program is actually trying to address. It is incredibly daunting. The guide outlines a stark reality right away. Around the world, millions of children begin their very first day of school already behind.
And what really stands out there is the clear distinction the text makes about why they are behind. The guide explicitly pushes back against the idea that these children lack inherent ability.
Right, it's not an intelligence issue.
Exactly. They are starting behind because early language was never consistently formed at home. It is a language gap, plain and simple.
It basically frames early cognitive development as an infrastructure issue. There's a quote from the guide that really anchors this entire philosophy.
I know the exact quote you mean. Schools cannot recover what was never built.
That's the one.
That line literally stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a heavy burden to place on the home, but scientifically it makes sense. We put an immense amount of pressure on the education system to just catch every child up.
But this framework argues that the architectural blueprint of a child's brain is finalized long before they ever step foot in a kindergarten classroom.
Right. It forces us to look at the timeline of human development through the lens of neuroplasticity. The guide breaks this timeline into two distinct phases, starting with the first 1,000 days of a child's life.
And from a neurological standpoint, this is the window where the brain is making millions of synaptic connections every single second.
Millions.
Yeah, it is the most critical leg of the race. This is the exact window where the primary caregiver is actively shaping the child's language centers, their baseline for confidence, their inherent curiosity.
So the guide moves from that initial highly plastic window to the next phase, which is the subsequent 2,000 days. And the vital point the text makes here is that everything happening in those next 2,000 days, complex problem solving, emotional regulation, reading comprehension, all of it rests entirely upon the neural foundation built in the first 1,000.
It's all scaffolding.
Exactly. If the structural integrity of that initial foundation is weak, the subsequent learning simply doesn't have the scaffolding it needs to hold it up.
Which naturally leads to a moment of total panic for a lot of parents.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, if you hear that the first 1,000 days dictate the trajectory of your child's entire academic future, the immediate response is anxiety, especially when formal preschool is often unavailable, wildly unaffordable, or just incompatible with a working family's schedule.
And that anxiety is exactly why the tone of that welcome header matters so much. The guide speaks directly to the caregiver who might be panicking, worrying that their child is falling behind. The core thesis here is actually a massive reassurance. Learning gaps are not inevitable. They are preventable.
And they are prevented with simple tools woven right into everyday life.
Yes. You do not need a heavily monetized elite preschool environment to build that cognitive foundation.
And that brings us to the actual mechanics of the program, which the guide playfully calls Basic Version 1.0.
I love that name.
It sounds like a software update, but it is deeply analog. And what is brilliant about Basic Version 1.0 is that it is defined just as much by what it removes from the equation as what it actually adds.
Let's dispel some of those myths right now. The framework explicitly removed the barriers of entry that usually intimidate parents. It does not ask caregivers to buy specialized educational materials.
And no fancy toys.
Right. It does not ask them to prepare lesson plans or carve out rigid blocks of instructional time in what is probably already a chaotic day. There is zero special training required, and it completely throws out the idea that a parent needs to know the perfect words to teach their child.
The founder uses the phrase pedagogy of presence. Let's break
Yeah.
that down, because pedagogy simply means the method and practice of teaching. So by pairing it with presence, the guide is arguing that your physical and emotional availability is the method.
Presence is the curriculum.
Exactly. The program is built on a reality that the mother, or primary caregiver, is the most effective teacher, not because she holds a degree in early childhood education, but because her voice is the neurological anchor the child trusts most.
So if I am a parent listening to this, and I am entirely on board with ditching the flashcards and the lesson plans, what does my Tuesday morning actually look like under this framework?
Well, the guide champions 5 specific, seemingly ordinary habits.
Let's go through them. The first one is simply talking out loud, just narrating what you are doing as you move through the house.
And neurologically, narrating your life is incredibly powerful. In developmental psychology, we talk about serve and return interactions.
Serve and return.
Right. When a baby babbles or a toddler points at a cup, that is a serve. When the parent responds, even just by saying, yes, I'm washing the blue cup, that is the return. Those constant, low-stakes verbal exchanges are literally wiring the brain for language processing.
If you're feeding their auditory cortex.
Exactly. With vocabulary, tone, syntax, and you're doing it without ever sitting them down for a formal lesson.
It makes a totally mundane task, like folding laundry, an educational touch point. Like, here's a red sock, let's find the other red sock.
Simple as that.
The second habit the guide focuses on is telling stories without books. I found this distinction really interesting. Why emphasize storytelling without the physical book?
Because when you remove the book, you remove the visual crutch. The child has to rely entirely on auditory processing and their own imaginative mapping to follow the narrative.
That makes a lot of sense.
Plus, it frees up the caregiver to maintain direct eye contact. That eye contact facilitates a shared emotional regulation. It tells the child, I am fully here with you. And it also models that storytelling isn't just something that exists in printed materials you buy at a store. It is a human tradition they can participate in anywhere, anytime.
Which perfectly transitions into the third habit, playing with sounds. And this isn't about teaching the alphabet sequentially, right? It is about phonemic awareness. Singing silly songs, rhyming words, making exaggerated animal noises.
Yeah, phonemic awareness is the ability to hear and manipulate the individual sounds in spoken words. It is the absolute prerequisite for reading. Long before a child needs to know that the symbol B makes a B sound, they need to be able to hear that bat and ball start with the exact same sound.
So playing with sounds in the bathtub or the car builds that auditory discrimination organically.
Exactly.
And then the fourth habit bridges that auditory play into the visual world. Noticing print, pointing out street signs, the letters on a cereal box, or the logo on a delivery truck. It contextualizes reading.
It shows the child that these abstract symbols actually hold meaning and are used to navigate the real world. It creates a print-rich environment out of thin air. You don't need to buy a specific curriculum when the environment around you is already covered in text waiting to be decoded.
The final habit in Basic Version 1.0 is honoring the child's drawings and ideas. When a kid hands you a paper with wild scribbles on it, the framework asks you to treat it with genuine curiosity.
Think about the cognitive leap required for a child to understand that a crayon squiggle represents a dog or a house. That is the birth of symbolic thought.
Wow, yeah.
When a caregiver validates that abstract representation, asking, tell me about this part here, they are reinforcing the neural pathways for abstract reasoning and narrative skills. They are showing the child that their ideas actually have value.
I see the immense value in these 5 habits, but I can easily imagine a caregiver looking at this list and thinking, I am just doing the same simple things every single day. I'm telling the same story about the dog. We're pointing at the same stop sign. Am I doing enough? Shouldn't we be advancing to something harder?
I initially thought the exact same thing. Doesn't this risk the child plateauing? But the guide anticipates this and offers a defensive repetition grounded purely in brain chemistry. Children learn through repetition. The process of myelination in the brain, where neural pathways are essentially insulated to make signals travel faster, it requires repeated exposure. But beyond the mechanics, there is the hormonal aspect. When activities repeat and feel familiar, they lower the child's cortisol levels.
And cortisol is the stress hormone.
Right. And high cortisol actively inhibits learning.
So a predictable, repetitive environment isn't boring. It is biologically safe.
Exactly. When a child feels safe and knows what to expect, their brain produces oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which accelerates neuroplasticity. The comfort of the familiar is what actually allows the brain to take risks and grow stronger.
The text has a great line summarizing this approach: a little every day instead of a lot for one day. It is a profound argument for consistency over intensity. 5 minutes of dedicated narrating play every morning shapes the brain far more effectively than trying to cram in 2 hours of high-stress, intense educational activities on a Sunday afternoon.
Which really forces us to completely reevaluate how we measure educational success in early childhood. We live in a society completely obsessed with data, metrics, and early benchmarks.
We want to quantify everything to prove we are doing a good job as parents.
Yeah.
But this program explicitly throws out the worksheets. It states very clearly that the early years are not the time for tests, grades, or comparing your child's milestones to the kid next door.
Growth does not need to be measured by a standardized test to be real.
But that does leave the caregiver with a highly practical question. If there are no tests, no flashcards, and no worksheets, how do you actually measure learning in Basic version 1.0?
The guide provides a completely different set of real-world metrics. You know the environment is working if you notice your child listening just a little bit longer than they used to, or if they are speaking more, laughing.
Remembering a detail from a story you told yesterday.
Exactly. Pointing at objects to initiate a conversation, or, frankly, simply enjoying time with you. Those are the actual indicators of cognitive growth.
And there is a surprising secondary metric introduced here that I found deeply compelling, because it doesn't measure the child at all. It measures the caregiver.
The caregiver's own emotional state.
Right. The guide suggests that if you, as the caregiver, notice yourself feeling more confident, calmer, or more aware of your own impact on the household, that is considered a primary indicator of sustained learning at home.
It acknowledges that the child's nervous system is co-regulating with the adult's nervous system. If the caregiver feels empowered by these simple habits rather than overwhelmed by some rigid curriculum, their cortisol drops. They become more present, and the home environment inherently transforms into a better incubator for development.
And we should probably mention the context of this document. This is a pilot phase. Rubio and the Stripling Warriors Guild are actively learning from these exact metrics in real time.
Yes. The founder writes directly to the participating families, thanking them for their courage and honesty. He notes that their ongoing feedback will help the program evolve to serve families better, more gently, and more effectively in the future.
The use of the word gently there really highlights the emotional core of this entire framework. And that emotional core comes to a head in the final section of the guide, which takes a fascinating structural turn. It includes a section titled, "A Note from Your Child to You."
It is a complete shift in perspective. Instead of the pedagogical framework directing the caregiver, the text is written in the voice of the child, speaking directly to their mother.
It is very moving.
It is a profound way to synthesize everything we have just talked about. It takes all that dense neurological research on neuroplasticity, myelination, and serve and return interactions and translates it into the lived emotional experience of a toddler.
I want to highlight a few specific sentences from this section because they are so grounded in that dual reality of science and emotion. It starts with this line: "Mother, you are the quiet beginning of everything good in my life."
Wow. It frames the parent not as an administrator of tasks, but as the atmosphere in which the child exists.
And it continues, "When you speak, I learn how to use my voice. When you listen, I learn that I matter. When you stay, I learn what trust feels like." That sequence perfectly mirrors the developmental psychology we unpacked earlier.
Because the serve and return interaction isn't just about learning vocabulary, it is about identity formation. The text explicitly makes the connection between presence and self-worth. It says something like, growth does not require perfection, It requires presence.
Right, presence over perfection.
A child does not care if a lesson plan is flawlessly executed. They care about the shared laugh. They care about the story being told for the 20th time because it means you are sitting right next to them.
In these moments, my future is being shaped. That is the true legacy the program is pointing toward. This isn't merely a strategy to ensure a child knows the alphabet before kindergarten. The note ends by saying, "You are not just raising me, you are shaping how I see myself and the world."
It's incredibly powerful. And while the branding and the primary framing of this document focus on the mother as the first teacher, the guide includes a crucial caveat at the very end to broaden the scope.
Yes, it makes sure to pull the lens back. The material explicitly states that these habits and philosophies can be utilized by fathers, uncles, aunts, grandmothers, and any other consistent caregiver, yielding the exact same developmental effects.
Because the neurological principles of trust, repetition, and presence are entirely universal.
Absolutely.
It also addresses the timeline. While the document heavily emphasizes the critical urgency of those first 1,000 days, it clarifies that these core practices remain highly effective as the child ages. They support children from birth through age 6 and even up to age 8.
So it is not a rigid window that suddenly slams shut on a child's third birthday. You didn't miss the boat if you start later. The overarching philosophy is just about meeting the child exactly where they are today, rather than stressing over where some standardized chart says they should be.
Precisely. You observe what the child is capable of in this exact moment, and you respond with simple, supportive, language-rich interactions. It is a highly adaptable framework because it relies on human connection rather than a static product.
We have covered incredible ground today. Moving from the microscopic reality of synaptic pruning in a toddler's brain to the macroscopic impact of a caregiver's emotional presence in the home. If we distill this entire guide down to a single big takeaway for you, listening right now, it is this. Genuine education does not start with a curriculum. It starts with connection. That's the core of it. You do not need to do everything perfectly, and you certainly do not need to buy your way into early development. You just need to keep doing something. One conversation, one story, one intentional moment of presence at a time.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, broader thought to chew on. We spent so much time discussing the power of a parent's presence, but we have to acknowledge the reality of the modern world.
Very true.
We are constantly being sold the newest, most high-tech educational toys and apps, often marketed as perfect solutions for busy, overworked parents. But if the absolute most advanced, irreplaceable, and scientifically powerful learning tool on the planet is simply your undivided human attention.
What does that mean for us?
Right. What does it mean when society pushes us towards screens instead of connection? If presence is the ultimate educational tool, doesn't true lasting educational reform actually require sweeping labor and economic reform first so that parents actually have the time to be present? Just something to mull over.
A brilliant question to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you on the next one.